Hey, it is your buddy, Peace and Harmony with you here today. Much love going out to all the beautiful, empowered harmonizers. We are zooming in and focusing in on a great viewer comment, and that is, how do I deal with the anger that is associated with a narcissistic individual, which has now been internalized? So, really, when we talk about an angry narcissist, we're really talking about a narcissistic injury or narcissistic rage when they just sort of explode out of nowhere. There's nothing that really has provoked them, they're just sort of angry. They might become aggressive or hostile. They might be giving dirty looks, snide comments, hurtful comments. They might be giving you the silent treatment, shutting you out, giving you sort of criticism and faulting you even though you haven't done anything wrong. And a lot of time, people with narcissists, because they tend to be so controlling, or they sort of exert a certain pressure or power just through the, I would say, forcefulness of their being. Oftentimes you're dealing with very much an entitlement energy. You're dealing with oftentimes sort of grandiose thinking, or sort of fantastical thinking, which isn't really grounded or rooted with a foundation. So it's just sort of this foundationless anger, which can go any direction at any time. Once you're in a relationship long enough with a narcissist or a psychopath, for that matter, you will begin to see their true colors. It kind of, just like with any relationship, yes, you grow, but there's a certain stage where things sort of stop at when you get into the narcissistic rage, which is oftentimes started by a narcissistic injury, where a narcissist doesn't feel that they are quote unquote in control, the one in the center of attention. The narcissistic rage can erupt when they don't feel that they're getting their way. And they feel that they are above the law and they should only deal with things that go their way or people that can make things happen for them. It's kind of an exclusivity at their level. So this is how they operate. This is their mindset and their attitude. However, if you are in close proximity or a relationship with this type of individual, you might have a difficult time standing up to this because of the degree of sort of the degree of the hostility. It's a very one-directional, sort of almost like a very immature or childlike temper tantrum, where they just are sort of beside themselves and acting silly, yet they might sort of tinge that with like a laugh. In other words, I'm really mad at you, but don't hold me accountable. In fact, we should make a joke out of you for this. So, people become then the butt of the joke. They, receive sort of comments from this individual, which might be seething or scathing in nature, meaning directed at you, what I would call pointed speech. And of course, when you're with them long enough, you're going to pick up this energetic vibration from that emotional body. And people internalize it, but often, like our viewer comment, he said, I've had enough of being treated with the silent treatment, stonewalling, and hostility. And now the anger has been internalized, and now our viewer is angry basically with himself for letting this go for so long. And how do you manage that? Be careful that then this is not sort of associated with yourself. There is a concept in psychology where by virtue of association, people can be sort of pinned or associated with a certain uncomfortable state even though they have not caused it. So particularly for the narcissists, like if you are, in a close relationship with them and things don't go well for them, they might make you the butt of the problem, the cause of the issue, the source of their pain, even though you are truly not the source of the pain. They sort of pin the problem on others, if you will. It's a projection, and they tend to link an association in their mind, which means a connection. In other words, they have to have an explanation for why they are experiencing this anger. And rather than owning and being responsible for it themselves, and tempering it down, reeling it in, curbing it, or keeping it in check, and not, allowing it to go diffuse onto other people who then are receiving a lot of this negative energy, oftentimes they don't do that. They don't feel, that they should have to curtail or change or, compromise. They are not into that. And so oftentimes people will get pegged or pinned through an association, and all of a sudden you become responsible for a whole blanket of woes that has nothing really to do with you. You might just be there, you might be present. So people oftentimes feel this sort of, it is my fault around them. And then so in the initial phase, especially children who are around these type of individuals, assume that because the adult is angry, it must be because of me. They must be angry at me. And then they then extrapolate, meaning pull out the the meaning that, I'm a bad child, or I'm a bad person, I have bad behavior, this person's always angry at me, and so it must be me. Their minds are not yet developed. They have that sort of fusion of boundaries. They haven't had that full separation or individuation into wholeness, into their own individual identity. It becomes fused with the abuser. So the anger then, can be sort of transmuted, or I would say it's kind of like an osmosis, if you will. You just sort of pick it up. You're picking up a bad emotional habit. And once you realize this, you get your head above water and you realize, wow, this is a little bit much. This is too much anger. I can't be the cause of all this. So you start to see the checks and balances and really no longer want to be surrounded by anger outbursts. It becomes very unpleasant. It'll affect your self-esteem. It'll affect your emotional body, your physical body. You'll begin to develop, the sort of bottled up tension, which then will express itself. Energy is not created or destroyed. Energy is. So, this is part of the work of the creator. So you have to understand you are not alone in going through this. Be very careful that you do not internalize and then sort of turn in on oneself, otherwise known as self-sabotage or self-sabotaging thoughts, where you become then almost like your own worst enemy. This is a very difficult state to identify, when you're going into, because you don't always see it coming. It just sort of reaches a certain tipping point or a specific penetration. In other words, I have had enough. You've tolerated it for too long. You have put up and shut up. You have tried to cope. And oftentimes there is more than compromise, that goes on. There might be a lot of sacrifice of your happiness, your smile, your laughter, your joy, your sense of humor, your physical health, your good fitness. If these are suffering because of a relationship that is plagued with too many problems, and you're sort of being the receptacle, if you will, almost like a garbage pail. They kind of just keep throwing their anger at you, and a lot of people just keep taking it. They just try to let it roll and let it roll down their back. They try all sorts of coping strategies when eventually all they're doing is coping. Their lifestyle becomes nothing more than a coping mechanism. This can become very uncomfortable, and this is not a good way to lead one's life. One eventually realizes. So, you begin to be able to back up and get a fresh perspective. You refresh your perspective. This is so important, not only for people who are going through trials, tribulations, stresses, relationship changes, physical changes, relationship changes. It is, an important thing that you awake up to. and that, this, you don't have to live this way or have that sort of lifestyle. You need to be able to back it up a little bit and slow down, so you can see what your body is trying to communicate. It's the divine within you, something of a higher nature is trying to knock on your door and get, your attention within your body. Basically, your heart begins pounding, your stomach begins to grumble, you begin to, have and store a lot of tension within. This will create, a lot of muscle tension, which can create sort of spasmodic muscles, where, as if you've held something for a long period of time and your arm shakes, you begin to develop, these sort of, issues. So you have to be very, very careful. This is not something to play with. This is not something that you just, I've dealt with it this long. I'm going to continue in this way. Because also with the covert narcissist, there can be sort of a silent hostility as well. Just sort of a tension that you can feel in the air. For a lot of people who are sensitive and empathic, it can be so thick you could cut it with a knife. I mean, you can just feel it. And so, but oftentimes people then want to be very supportive of the narcissist while simultaneously they're being unsupportive of themselves. So this can become a real habit or pattern of relating, pattern of living. And I think for our viewer, they're angry at myself for allowing this disrespect and for not defending myself while she is being extremely rude. So in other words, you're having that aha moment. You're realizing you're getting your head above water. You're able to see the forest for the trees. You're seeing a certain challenge that you have put up against yourself that is not necessary and that also is maybe destructive, and you deserve better. You deserve a different climate. You deserve a different ethos, an environment for you to inhabit, i.e., namely, your own physical body. You have to be able to inhabit your life within and sort of be able to move a little bit more slowly and gracefully as one unit, rather than being caught up in a lot of engineered chaos or trying to figure out why you've got this angry hostility, why you've got some silent hostility that you're just sort of sick of ignoring. You don't want to live, ignoring will make you ignorant. I'm not sure if there's a root word, but, to ignore, this and to not address it will build up with time. It'll get to a tipping point. In other words, nope, it's toxic. This cannot go on. It has reached a tipping point and you cannot ignore it any longer. So be very careful that you detach from that sort of emotional body and emotional habit. And you go, wow, this is costing me too much happiness, joy, and namely your perspective, meaning what you take in, what you focus on, what you develop within your day, within your week, within your month, within your year, and your life. So it can create and keep in place and intact low self-esteem, low self-respect, which also is a symptom. Not listening or heeding one's own internal navigation or compass, not heeding one's own barometric needle of, this is too much, this is too hurtful, I should not be treated this way. So a lot of people, they will let it go, let it slide, thinking it will change, and then, people then who become overly responsible and then say, well, maybe I'm here in the relationship to help them change. And then they're very resistive to change, very resistant, meaning not apt to change. So this can then get to that point where you can't ignore it any longer. And so you have to change the emotional habit. You have to detach oftentimes from that source that's creating this effect in your life. If to ignore is to refuse to take notice or acknowledge and to disregard intentionally. So if you're going through that where you're sort of being ignored, It's not just that you're being shut out, you're literally being treated as if you don't physically exist, you're not there in the flesh. I'm sorry, but you are there in the flesh. You don't need to ignore this any longer. Because to ignore is to fail. It's to fail to consider something significant when we get to the stage of a relationship. And you have to find the foundation to get you out of that and to stop being ignored, stop being disrespected, stop being treated like half a person, treated like a second-rate individual, or disrespect without acknowledgement and validation. It doesn't have to cost someone a lot of time, but oftentimes the narcissist is not willing to give the time, which to them is basically people receive that message as rejection, and that they must not be worth it as an individual. So you have to understand there's a lot of complexity to these relationships. There's a lot going on. So you have to be able to unpack and understand what I call the moving parts. It's kind of like an engine. You've got a gear. It's making the whole car run. So when we talk about relationships, you have to look at the foundation and the engine that is driving it. And so if you've been treated this way, realize that it's very important that you are gentle and compassionate and empathetic to yourself. Forgive yourself. Everybody enters into the relationship, I would say, in the name of love and with the best intentions, for having a happy, productive, joyful relationship that is going somewhere, but if this is not the cost, if this is not the case, then stop paying, the emotional cost of being unhappy. That's a big toll to take. And, you need to reclaim your life, reclaim your I am and your freedom. You don't need to suffer endlessly and suffer silently. Oftentimes people get stuck in that phase of the relationship, the love bombing, the devalue, and the discard. You don't need to be repeatedly devalued, because eventually you will soak that up through osmosis. You will absorb that way of thinking, and then you will begin to devalue yourself. So you're going, contradictory to your own best interest. So, realize that legitimate anger does have a very important role to fuel you, I would say, in the right direction. M. Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled, believes that a lot of life suffering is due to, believing falsehoods or lies. And that, this suffering, people then do go through legitimate suffering, legitimate anger. The problem is when you have a lot of illegitimate suffering, a lot of illegitimate anger, that anger is used in excess or creating violence or something that is wrong on a microcosm or macro scale. So be very careful to have empathy, forgiveness for yourself, compassion for yourself. Be willing to be gentle with yourself and move slow. Move in grace as you are one unit. You might get thoughts going all over the place. Be able to navigate comfortably. And acknowledge, don't ignore yourself. Don't carry the same bad habit of being ignored, the way the narcissist does. Don't internalize that and then ignore yourself. Ignore or don't unacknowledge yourself. Acknowledge and validate yourself. I am worthy of living in a peaceful body. I am worthy of living in a peaceful environment. I deserve to just be. I am and I exist, and so it is. There's a very important energetic shift, I would say, that you have to experience. And namely, to enter into sort of what I would call the quantum field, where things are as they should be. And because you're acknowledging and validating this within yourself, you are here for a reason. There are no accidents. So you need to value and come away with a value lesson for yourself, so that you no longer are paying the price with your own happiness, but you're paying your joy is creating value in your life. Oftentimes this dynamic can get flipped around in manipulative controlling relationships with others who are oftentimes relating to us in a way that is not in our best interest. This is your buddy, Peace and Harmony, with you here today, and I hope that these videos do help. Please share, please subscribe, and for goodness sake, please donate for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support. Have a beautiful day, and peace be with you.